So welcome everybody to AAI Architecture session. I think we have some very interesting presentations today. So we have already heard from Christos about the objectives of EOSC AI Task Force. Thank you very much, Christos, for this very informative presentation. And I think this was a very good grounds to set us up to actually now dig deeper and listen about some of the other AI activities on EOSC, research communities and RIs. So we will have the opportunity to hear about results of AI activities in EOSC-Hub project, but also we will hear about the plans for AI in EOSC Future looking forward. So these are actually the first and the last presentation we will have today. And then we will have also two presentations from perspective of the RIs and research communities. So we will hear about the AI implementation of UmbrellaID and also environmental RIs. So the agenda looks like this. We will have about 10 minutes for each presenter. I will be tracking time and giving you 2 minutes warning before your time is up. We will not be taking questions during the presentations, but after all of the presentations are finished, we will have 15 minutes for the questions. Please raise your hands when you're posting questions. Also, you can use chat to already write some questions in case you don't forget them for later on. So very efficient in time. I already saved some time for us for the discussion. So we will jump straight into the first presentation from today. It will be from Nicolas Liampotis, who is working in GRNET as Trust and Identity Engineer. He will tell us about the results of the AI integration activities in the EOSC-Hub project, as it provided the initial implementation of EOSC federated AAI, and it's built on ARC blueprint architecture. So please, Nicolas.
So hello, everyone. I'm Nicolas Liampotis from GRNET, which is the Greek Research and Education Network, and I'm here to discuss our AI integration experiences from the EOSC-Hub project, which started the beginning of 2018 and was completed just a couple of months ago. Next slide, please. So what was our mission? So the AI task aimed to contribute to the EOSC implementation roadmap by enabling seamless access to a system of systems, data, services across nations and disciplines. By building on existing AI solutions from EGI, EUDAT, GÉANT, and Indigo Data Cloud, and by leveraging the institutional identity providers from EduGAIN, but also social media identities in order to expand access to from researchers to business organizations. Next slide, please. So these are the high-level requirements from two different perspectives. So from the end user's point of view, they need a way, a simple way to access different services using a single sign-on solution. They want to be able to choose which role they want to use when they access resources. They want to be able to delegate their access rights to agents who can act on their behalf while they can be even offline. And very importantly, to be able to collaborate with researchers from other institutes that can be distributed all over the world. Now, from the resource provider's point of view, they need to know the identity information behind any access request, because they need to be able to implement access control, accounting for resource usage, logging, auditing, and to be able to respond to security incidents and block misbehaving or malicious activities. And something that is a common requirement for both end users and resource providers, simplicity. So no one wants to be bothered with AI. AI needs to be as transparent as possible. Next slide, please. So what are the features that we extracted based on these requirements? First, to be able to support different authentication providers. I mentioned institutional providers from EduGAIN, social media, ORCID, other community managed identity providers, and minimize the number of accounts that end users need to manage. We need to support access to heterogeneous services, both web and non-web browser-based services, using different protocols offered by different infrastructures. We will need to allow researchers to link multiple identities, for example, institutional and social ones, and access resources with one identity. And we also want to support access control based on attributes. For example, the groups of the user, roles, affiliation, bona fide status, which can be managed by the home organization of the user or their research community. Next slide, please. Interoperability is also a key feature because we want to be able to integrate the EOSC AI with the existing AIs of other infrastructures or research communities. It is also crucial to be able to provide a consistent and harmonized set of attributes in compliance with the minimal disclosure principle, ensuring good practices in operational security, be able to coordinate to incidents across federated organization, and lastly, to be able to express the level of trust in the identity assertions made about the users. Next slide, please. So we needed to find an architecture that supports all these features, but luckily we didn't have to design a new architecture from scratch because we had the ARC blueprint architecture that already supports researchers to collaboratively access resources in a secure and user-friendly manner. Next slide, please. So in the EOSC-Hub integrated AI architecture includes two basic layers. There is the community layer, which enables the use and the management of community identities through the community AI service. And then there is the infrastructure proxy layer, which groups the different research and infrastructure proxies that mediate access to the services offered by the research and infrastructures. Next slide, please. So what this architecture does for the end user. So researchers only need to register once with their community AI. Then they can always sign in through their community AI in order to access different types of services. There are the community-specific services, so services that are offered to their specific community. There are generic services, and there are also general-purpose compute, storage, data management services offered by the research and infrastructures. Next slide, please. Now, from the resource provider's point of view, this architecture provides the research infrastructure proxy, which serves as a single integration point for services. So this enables easier integration. For example, they don't need to run an IDP discovery on each service, and access to resources can be based on either community membership or home organization affiliation. Next slide, please. Now, what are the use cases that can be supported with this architecture? First of all, for those that want to consume EOSC services and resources, there are actually two sub-use cases, let's say. So if there is a community that already operates an ARC BPA compliant community AI, then they only need to connect their community AI to the different infrastructure proxies that are part of the infrastructure proxy layer. Next slide. For a community that does not operate its own AI, then they can use among the different multi-tenant community AI services that are part of the EOSC-Hub integrated AI. Next slide, please. There is, for example, the B2 Access service offered by EUDAT, check-in from EGI, Edu Teams from GÉANT, there's Indico EAN. Next slide. Now, from the point of view of the resource provider, so the EOSC AI allows someone to offer their services and resources through EOSC. And again, if the infrastructure already operates an ARC BPA compliant infrastructure proxy, then they need to connect it with the community AIs whose members they want to serve. Next slide. And again, if they don't have their own ARC BPA compliant infrastructure proxy, they can connect it to any of the infrastructure proxies that are part of the integrated EOSC AI. Next slide. So to summarize the achievements of the EOSC AI integration activities, we managed to harmonize the way that the user and community information is expressed by adopting guidelines for expressing, for example, groups and capabilities. Next slide. There was also a lot of harmonization activities at the policy level, where the different AI services adopted, for example, the certified security framework for the operational security and incident response policies, the WISE baseline AUP model for the acceptable use policy, There was also the ARC, the adoption of the privacy policy through the ARC policy development kit template that also is compliant with the GÉANT Data Protection Code of Conduct, version 1. Next slide. We also managed to demonstrate the technical ability for research communities using different community AIs, B2Access, Check-in, EduTeams, Indigo, to access resources. Next slide. Then there was an improvement of the white-labeled RCO online CA service, which is one of its first CA to be operated by different organizations. And this new high availability architecture improves the user experience as it improves the latency, provides high reliability and improved performance. Next slide. Then another major achievement was the delivery of the white-labeled EOS Portal AI, which enables researchers and communities to access the EOS portal and also allows connecting the EOS Core and EOS support services to the EOS federated AI. Next slide. And lastly, but not least, here I would also like to point out some of the gaps and the lessons learned from this, from our AI integration experiences. So currently, it can be frustrating as users need to go through multiple identity provider discovery steps. But we have a new specification that recently was published that could improve the user experience in these scenarios. We also identified a limitation in the current architecture, which does not support token-based workflows that involve multiple infrastructures. There is, of course, already a short-term solution, which is connecting services to multiple proxies, and this has been proven to work. As a mid-term solution, we're looking into extending some of the standard OpenID Connect and OAuth2 flows, for example, the introspection. And as a long-term solution, we see the adoption of the OpenID Connect Federation as a way to better support the scenarios. And lastly, through our exercise of connecting the different community AI services with the different proxy services, we realize that establishing end-to-end trust relationships can pose scalability issues, especially with the growing number of community AIs and infrastructure proxy services. But again, there is a solution for that. It's the EOS AI Federation, for which Christos will discuss in his presentation later on. And in the final slide, next one, there's a link to information about EOSC AI, including documentation. So thank you very much for your attention. We're happy to take questions at the Q&A session at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. Great presentation. Certainly a lot of the work, very good work done, and some hints left for future projects to pick up this work. Thank you. So, and right on time. So we have our next presenter for today. That is Jean-François, Perrin. He's currently in charge of the IT infrastructure at the European Synchrotron, and he's also coordinating the work on EOSC integration in the PaNOSC project. François was involved in construction operation of the Photon and Neutron Community AAI, and today he's going to present the evolution of this infrastructure to meet the EOSC expansion. So Jean-François, please. François, sorry.
Hi, hello everybody. Yes, next slide, please. So just for starting very, very briefly, what is the community? We are talking here about the PAN community, so Photon and Neutron. This is all the array operated in the as a laser, as a synchrotron, as a free electron laser, as neutron sources. So this is what we call analytical facilities. We have a very large user community. This is something around 50,000 users with very different profiles. I mean, in terms of scientific fields, scientific domains, from biology to nuclear physics, archaeology, this is extremely diverse. Also, we have a large part of academic users, but a part which is non-negligible of industrial users. quite often these users have very limited IT knowledge and support. So really user experience is key for what we are doing. We are data producer, clearly. Dozens of petabytes per year for some of the research infrastructures that are open, but only after an embargo period. So AI is here and authorization is very important from the beginning. And the IT teams or internal team specialists focus mainly on the data production. So everything related to the acquisition of data, computing, the preservation of fair data and the production of fair data, and on the scientific support, so the support to the scientist. Typically here we'll talk about data services and day-to-day user support. We have two EOSC main projects, PaNOSC and Expand, the sister project. Next, please. So quite quickly, we needed, so it was in 2012 that was in production, we needed an AI infrastructure. The initial goal was to be able to provide common services, so services that could be provided by more than one AAI and seen as a user as a single service. So for that, we needed an AI, and the core of this AI was to have a common and persistent unique ID for the users. And at that time, with the discussion we had with the specialist of AI, we had some difficulties in the discussion to be understood. This is something which was not seen as really a standard way to proceed. Authorization also was a difficult topic, and we wanted the authorization mechanism is really in the hand of the AAI providing the data and the service. Technically, it was a relatively simple infrastructure with one IDP. Technically, it was based on two different IDPs with high availability mechanism, metadata registry, very simple. In terms of protocol, from the beginning, we were using SAML and Moonshot for the non-web access, and we were in that stage since 2012. Next slide, please. But in 2018, we had to prepare for EOSC. We really wanted to join EOSC and join the effort of EOSC. And at that time we were looking, we noticed that AI was really a new landscape, and EOSC was a sort of hurdle. What means EOSC in terms of AI at that time was not completely clear and not very clear for us. The technology were also in evolution. We are more and more talking about OpenID Connect. There was new regulations, and typically the GDPR and the question of liability of our infrastructure. Security concern were raising up as well. Are we really able to provide a professional service? There was a disclosure on the use of Umbrella, but it was not sufficient anymore, clearly. But we still have had our specific needs in terms of unique and persistent ID. What I mean persistent is that typically our users are PhD in a university, and at the end of the PhD, we move to another organization, but they need to continue to have access to their data in terms of authorization and some technical specificities. But the conclusion at that time was really that we needed to enter EOSC, needed to strengthen a collaboration with some other actors and key actors of the domain. Yes, please. So what we have done, we wrote some specification. They were not very technical, but what we wanted to get for a collaboration, where were our difficulties, the one we have identified at least. And we had initial contact with GÉANT. Why GÉANT? Because they were strongly involved in AI. We were using EduRoam, EduGAIN also a little bit. And we were in collaboration with the different NRENs over the years, the previous years. GÉANT was, so we had a technical meeting, very practical, to explain what is the ARC BPA, could be the future of the AI for EOSC. And we got sort of agreement on using the EduTeams platform, EduTeams service, which is provided by GÉANT. So we went for an official validation by the UmbrellaID management team. And at the start of the PaNOSC project, we started with GÉANT to set up the GÉANT set up the EduTeam platform for us. We had some period of test validation. And then when we consider it as production ready for use case, we started to migrate the service, the different SP service provider of the community. And this is where we stand where we were standing end of last year. All the SPs of the UmbrellaID has been migrated to use the EduTeam as the proxy layer. We started to look a bit more in terms of metadata. To join EOSC, we needed to add metadata. And clearly, from the beginning, we had a single metadata, which was this unique ID. Now, where we stand, we would like to go a step further, so introduce new IDPs, and at some point, get rid of the current IDP and get rid of the liability of managing the IDP ourselves. So today we are at that stage. We have not decommissioned the current Umbrella IDP, but this is in the process. And we can move to the next slide, please. So after 2 years of collaboration and moving to EduTeam, I think we can say that it has been extremely fruitful for us, for the community. We had no sufficient specialist of AI to maintain a professional service, at least professional service with the new challenges and with EOSC. So the collaboration with GÉANT brings us the ability to face these challenges. We have also improved in 10 years, which was not difficult, but we have improved clearly in the way we understand and we understood each other and the community specificities. So the series of projects has really bring that, and the fear we had some years ago that not to be understood has completely disappeared. The other benefits is that we are completely aligned with the latest AI development, technical developments. And that's really a bonus for us. We have very easy access to expertise. So every time we have a very difficult case where we don't have a technical solution ready, we can contact our partners and try to discuss what is the best approach. And finally, we had been able to integrate seamlessly the service, so really the core of PaNOSC, the data services, into EOSC without any problem with the AI. On the other side, this collaboration has also, for us, was a way to feed the AI specialist with very practical use case. And I've seen that in the previous presentation that they were mentioned when Nicolas was talking about the gaps. So if you want to go for the next slide. Yes, just to explain a bit more, we have collaboration with GÉANT, but we have also collaboration with EGI, and we have a pilot on using the EGI Data Hub. So in this pilot, EGI is providing compute services for users, and we are, the AAI, is providing the data. So we are using EGI Data Hub to feed the compute service with the data, but very quickly we had a small difficulty. So the compute service, as it is provided by EGI, they wanted to have a check-in authentication of the user. But in the meantime, for the authorization on the data, we needed that the user authenticate with UmbrellaID. So for that pilot, at the time of that initial pilot, this was not ready or not ready. We could find a technical solution to overcome the problem, but not something which is standard and could allow exactly what we expect from EOSC, where users could mix services and typically data services with compute services provided by other communities. So these difficulties has been bring back to GÉANT, to the different working task force, and is now clearly handled. There is no clear solution for now, at least at my level, but this is handled by the specialist, and this is really what we needed. Yes, next slide. Yeah. So that's all for today, and we'd like to thank all the people around for the support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean-François. Spot on with time also. I think it was also very interesting to hear the road of Umbrella AAI and how it changed with desire to join EOSC and to be interoperable. Also, one topic which is connecting probably all the presentations is that also the EOSC-Hub AAI, also the Umbrella AAI uses infrastructure which follows ARC blueprint architecture, which makes our infrastructures interoperable. And this is very important. Okay, so we go to our next presentation, who will be given by Keith Jeffery, who is now consultant and was previously director of IT at STFC in UK, running a large department supporting researchers across everything from particle physics to performance art. So Keith will be talking to us about harmonization and implementation of policies and AI solutions within the environmental ARIs.
Thank you very much, Marina, for the introduction. Yes, I should confess that my background is geology. I did my PhD in the 1960s using very interesting computers. Okay, next slide, please. ENVRI in numbers, we're 26 RIs. We've had 3 cluster projects, and we're dealing with air, water, life, and land. And the bit that I know best, of course, is land, the geology, the solid earth. Next slide, please. So within ENVRI, we set up a task force to deal with AAI. And this is led by 2 of us from EPOS, which is the earth science component of ENVRI. Daniela Bailo is the chair of this task force, and I'm the co-chair. So our main objective is we want to have AAI both within our subdomains, that is air, water, earth, and life, and also across our ENVRI hub, which links all these together. So we're not building a centralized IDP. In fact, we use many different IDPs, and some RIs like EPOS use software like Unity to manage single sign-on and federation across multiple identities. So we started with requirements. We did a landscape survey of where each of the 26 RIs is at the moment and where they plan to go. We did a gap analysis. We created a roadmap, and we're now moving slowly but surely to implementation. Next slide, please. So our goals for our task force, just read the bits that are in bold. We want to federate access. We want to access shared resources. We want to have a minimal level of permissions for everyone to get to everything. We want to be able to extend to EOSC in a compatible way, and we want to promote authorization policies. Next, please. Of course, we're using the ARC blueprint architecture, and thanks to Licia Florio, who came and gave a very nice presentation on it to our task force. Next, please. So we did an analysis of the current standards that were available for doing authentication and authorization. Our requirements are top right of this slide. And the table bottom right shows pretty obviously what the choice is, OIDC and OAuth 2. Next slide, please. So that has lots of implications we have to deal with. So here are the implications we decided we had to keep in mind. We need to have a unique reference implementation that's robust and working. We want the processing and logic for authorization restrictions. We want to converge to an agreed technology for federating the RIs, and that is indeed OIDC and OAuth 2. We wanted tight communication channels among the AI managers. That wasn't there, and we've been creating that and making it work. And of course, to support that, we need a contact list so we can make sure that we have ways of ensuring compatibility, especially on the interface and the mechanism for passing tokens, and an interoperation system backed up by a reward system to encourage interoperation mechanisms. And there's also a cross-link to governance, which I'll come to a bit later in this presentation. Different governance bodies in the RIs have to agree towards a shared governance framework within which we can implement AAI. And this includes things like the dreaded GDPR. Next, please. Right, now I'm now moving on to EPOS, which is one of the RIs. EPOS brings together over 200 asset suppliers, which use between them 17 different metadata formats, which we integrate through a very extended DCAT AP into our catalog, which uses ESRF, that's Common European Research Information Format, which is a very rich metadata format that allows not only discovery and contextualization, but also handles curation, provenance, and citation. Next, please. So I'm now going to talk more about how we see AAI in a broader framework. So we decided that we had various policy areas we had to deal with. There's the list: asset provision, access, personal data protection, security, and RRI. And we decided what we had to do is, blue box on the right, move from policies to guidelines, which are implemented in a combination of governance structures and in the IT using the AAI system and the rich metadata catalog. Next, please. So here it is diagrammatically, and what you can see is the policies are on the left. There's an N-to-M relationship between policies and guidelines, and the guidelines we implement using AAI and catalog in the IT system. Next, please. So the guidelines basically utilize these policies and say how they are to be used, both in governance, i.e. management action, and in the IT to support it. So for each guideline, we're busy building them now. We have the issue, the solutions, the actors, and then the actions. And just to remind you, the policy areas are in the blue box on the right: asset provision, access, personal data protection, security, and RRI. Next, please. So bringing all this together in one diagram. In ENVRI, and indeed in EPOS, we're using the same diagram, excuse me. We're using the same diagram. We have overall policy at the top, which is the objectives of the organization, mission critical things. Then it splits into two. On the left, RRI, which is basically everything to do with people and their rights. And on the right, assets, everything to do with assets and their rights. And then within the IT system, i.e. the red ellipse, then on the left, there's the things to do with people, like user identity and how you identify through an API. And that is part of the AAI system, but also links to the catalog. On the right, you have curation, cataloging, and provenance, which are the three main areas dealt with by the rich metadata catalog, and where we record policies, including, for example, licenses associated with assets. In the middle, in blue, security, privacy, GDPR, and access control, GDPR being a specialization of privacy, by the way. This is the area where the rights of people on the left and the rights of assets on the right meet, and where we have to resolve the balance between these two things. Next, please. So within the EPOS framework, we made 5 conclusions that we presented to EPOS management. I include them here because they may be useful for others. First of all, the governance and management bodies need to know that this is a big effort. It's a huge undertaking. The second thing that our management needed to know is that we had to provide them with some understandable document so that governance and management could be aligned with the policies and with the underlying IT. The third conclusion was that we had to co-design these policies and guidelines with appropriate experts, and from there specify whatever IT is required. Next, please. The fourth one is that we needed a roadmap to prioritize. We can't do everything at once. And so this roadmap gives us a pathway to get the implemented policies in a properly governance constructed form to allow us to do everything. And in fact, what we've just put into our production system in EPOS is all the stuff to do with GDPR, cookies, and terms and conditions. And these, of course, relate directly to AAI. And the fifth conclusion is related to the fourth. We have to decide the balance between the minimal acceptable implementation and full implementation, and then resource it appropriately. And at the moment, we're going for minimal implementation because basically we can't afford to do more than that. That's it. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, what's happening? Yeah, that's where we are. Sorry, I forgot this last slide. So in EPOS, all this is underway. And in ENVRI, we've got the general roadmap agreed. We're finalizing the detailed landscape survey at technical level, down to the level of what is included in, for example, the scopes within OAuth 2 tokens. And the next step is an implementation plan for each RI and for ENVRI Hub, converging within about 1 year on an integrated solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith. Very interesting. Good to hear you're also using ARC BPA. Great takeaway and great 5 conclusions. I agree. It's a big endeavor. We need to make our governance bodies aware of that. And I think it was a great presentation of how ENVRI is thinking about policies, guidelines, GDPR and security in the same time as you guys design the underpinning architecture and IT solutions. So very good, thank you. Which leaves us now with the last presentation for today, which will be given by Christos Kanellopoulos, who is Senior Trust and Identity Manager in GÉANT. And he will be talking to us about the future, the EOSC future, implementing the EOSC AI.
Thank you very much, Marina. Hello, everyone. Next slide, please. So the goal of the EOSC AI in EOSC Future, first of all, is let me say that it picks up on where EOSC-Hub left and was delivered, and you saw all the interesting things that came out of it from Nicolas. And within the phase 2 of the implementation of EOSC, basically in the context of the EOSC AI, what we're going to do is to plan, deliver, and improve the EOSC federated AI. And that's something that we will be doing in collaboration with the EOSC AI task force. And as part of that, we do consider, first of all, the proxies that connect the EOSC core services. This is one focal point. The other are the auxiliary services that we need to have in place in order to have a functional EOSC AI that will be able to connect all the communities, infrastructures, and services. And the also online certification authority, which is also a very important component for the support of legacy workflows, etc., that require online certificates. Within the EOSC AI, we want to facilitate the integration of the community AIs to the EOSC AI, all of what we have here before, but for the wider community. Make sure identity providers are available and they are close with services, and that there is a clear path of how to go forward with this. We will be providing coordinating consultancy and support to communities and research infrastructures on how they can take advantage of the EOSC AI and offer their services. But also we plan to be active and contribute to the ongoing work on the various international standardization activities. We heard about the ARC blueprint architecture a number of times. We consider EOSC to be a big stakeholder of the ARC community, and we want to continue working with the ARC community in order to make sure that the use case requirements of the European Open Science Cloud are heard and are addressed within the next versions of the ARC blueprint architecture. Apart from that, previous slide a little bit. We do want also to connect and contribute to the wider community with FIM4R and REFEDS, make sure that the EOSC presence is there, not only within the European scale, but also the international level. Next slide, please. For those who watched my presentation an hour ago, more or less, these are the guiding principles that the EOSC task force came up with during the period of 2019 to 2020, and we fully embrace them. The first measure of success is user experience, and this is exactly what we want and we need to be able to deliver with the EOSC AI. I remind all trust flows from the communities, the collaborations, and there is no center in the distributed system. We have already heard various infrastructures implementing their own AIs. There are multiple centers from the point of view from where you stand. Actually, you might see different things as a center of your ecosystem in terms of AI from the community users. This is the community AI, and we have to embrace this and understand that. Next slide, please. The EOSC task force that concluded its work in 2020 came up with a number of gaps and challenges, and this is for us our starting point, what we need to do in order to improve the EOSC AI and go forward. The first point is scalability, and I will talk a bit about more in a few moments. Nicolas already hinted about this in his presentation. We need to go from end-to-end, peer-to-peer trust relationships to a federated approach where trust will be part of the solution and not rather established on a bilateral matter. Community attributes and authorization, and I think Keith already mentioned authorization policies. Jean-François already mentioned the need for a community identifier and attributes flowing towards the services. This is a key aspect for the success of the EOSC AI. Multi-infrastructure workflows is also very, very important. Jean-François had a very nice slide showing the use case of PaNOSC and Umbrella, and this is exactly what we talk about when we show multi-infrastructure workflows. People, users, researchers need to be able to compose their own infrastructures on top of the various offerings in EOSC, and they should expect to have seamless access to these offerings for their workflows. A few gaps that were identified in the first version of the Strategic Research Innovation Agenda document that was published earlier this year was that there is no consistent user experience for AI across the science ecosystem. This is something very important, and we need to think about this. There is no consistent interface for service providers, and this is also very important because we need to make sure that the service onboarding is as easy as possible and with clean interfaces. And last but not least, and I think this is also very interesting, we need to think about going beyond the research and education. EOSC is not only about the R&D community. We need to go beyond, and the AI needs to scale beyond that. Next slide, please. So what we're doing in EOSC Future, we have identified a high-level roadmap for the duration of this implementation project, and we try to do this high-level roadmap in the way of a user story, what we want to enable in a way that is understandable by users. So for month 6 of the project, which is basically September-October period, what we want to deliver with EOSC AI is the capability for a researcher, and there, for example, we chose a researcher from PaNOSC that can seamlessly use compute and storage resources by the infrastructures in order to perform the computation analysis, and to be able to do that without having to re-register across infrastructures when they go beyond the boundaries of the service providers. So you saw again in Jean-François' slide deck that the user using the UmbrellaID, they will have to go to the EGI infrastructure to use compute resources and then store the results back to the storage facilities provided at the laboratories that are part of PaNOSC. How can we do this in a seamless way? And this has policy implications, and we need to make sure that we can deliver a seamless experience. And I was very happy to see that also Keith, in his presentation, that's very much the policy aspect, because everything starts from there and the technology follows. The next point for month 6 was that the EOSC Federation, do not change slide, please. The EOSC Federation is operational. This is very important. I will talk about this in one moment a bit more, but this is one of the key goals that we have, at least for the beginning of the EOSC Future project. And of course, along with that comes with the capability and to provide more guidance, have more support material for the research infrastructures, but also to investigate how we can enable not only users and researchers use the EOSC AI, but also the service components that are part of the EOSC AI to be able to do these integrations. And one very good example is how the various portals can basically communicate, contact, authenticate themselves to each other to be able to exchange, update the resource catalogs. Next slide, please. For month 18, basically more or less a year, around September, October 2022, what we want to do is build upon what we have done in the first 6 months. And now we want the same researcher to be able to not only access resources provided by infrastructure providers, but actually to be able to consume resources provided by another research infrastructure. And in this example, we chose, again, a researcher from PaNOSC trying to access resources from ESCAPE. Again, having the same seamless experience using the identity of the community, or the UmbrellaID identity in this case, and to be able to consume those resources. Researchers need to be able to do more advanced workflows. They need to be able to orchestrate data analysis using multiple infrastructure providers and get results back to the resource systems. And given that by then we will have the EOSC Federation operational, we're going to see all the major components, the infrastructure proxies, and community and cluster community AIs to be fully integrated in the EOSC AI Federation. We do plan also to provide some guidelines for cross-infrastructure credential delegation and verification, which is exactly addressing the problem that Jean-François described, and this is the midterm solution that Nicolas was talking about in his presentation. Next slide, please. A year from then, 2023, more or less close towards the end of 2023, we build again on top of what we have achieved by then, and now we want to enable the researcher to do the full research lifecycle, where they can do the data processing, the storage of this data, the analysis, the publishing also, and all of this using resources available through EOSC in a transparent way and seamless way. By month 30, community AIs, not just the big clusters infrastructures, should be integrated with the EOSC Federation, and there should be a self-service onboarding, very easy also for these smaller collaborations to be able to be part of the EOSC Federation. And another very important aspect, again, going beyond research and education, we're going to look into the cross-sector access and how to enable the EOSC federated AI, how we can interoperate with industry, trusted systems, so that they can also take advantage of what we're offering within the context of the European Open Science Cloud. Next slide, please. I want to say just a couple of words regarding the EOSC Federation, because I think this is very important. Nicolas hinted on this. Today, we are where you see on the left side of the screen, we have a number of components already available on the EOSC AI interoperating, but they're built on top, where they're building end-to-end trust. For each component we're adding, we need to build specific trust relationships with everything else within the EOSC AI. This doesn't scale, and we have been on this for quite some time. We are moving now towards the EOSC Federation, which will bring together all of the entities, the components that need to be part of the EOSC AI, and with an interoperability framework, clear rules for the participation for the EOSC AI, and the necessary support services, we want to make this trust seamless across all the entities that are part of the EOSC AI Federation, given that they have joined. So they join once, they meet the requirements once, and then trust will flow among all the relevant parties. Again, for this, we're building upon the knowledge and experience we have gained from doing federations within the research and education space for the last 20 years in the national context, and now we're bringing this all experience in the European Open Science Cloud. There is a link hidden here at the bottom of the screen, where you can go and read the output of the previous EOSC task force, which explains exactly what we want to do with the EOSC Federation. And next slide, please. So this is all I had for you today. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions in the Q&A session.
Perfect, Christos. Thank you very much. Certainly a lot of very good work as we look forward, and we are looking forward to see the results. So now we have 11 more minutes to take questions. It would be great if people who would like to ask questions raise hands. I didn't see any questions in the chat in the meantime. So please don't be shy. I'm sure there was a lot of very inspirational topics for you. If not, I will have to torture our speakers with some questions. Still no questions. Okay. So then I have a very generic question to all of the speakers. So that
Marina,
yes,
there is a question from Pavel.
Was it in the chat? Thank you, Christos. I can just put away the chat. Let me see. Oh, it's a question for Christos. How exactly the EOSC Federation will solve end-to-end connection problem?
So yes, the concept of the EOSC Federation is basically that all the components within the EOSC Federation will trust effectively the process and the policies that the EOSC Federation has put in place. So right now, today, for all the proxies that are, for all the components that are within the blueprint architecture, we need to start to establish manually the technical configurations and the trust relationships between the entities. But having the EOSC Federation will allow us basically to just trust one feed of that information, and that feed can be updated when a new entity comes and joins the federation, and that will flow to all the components that are already members of the federation, and all of them expecting exactly that if an entity and a component service is in the EOSC Federation, that it meets the baseline requirements that are set for this federation. Does it make sense, Pavel?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you very much, Christos.
Okay, thank you. More questions. Oh, from Keith, also to Christos. How does EOSC envisage translating license information in metadata to OAuth 2 scopes?
This is a very interesting question and very specific question. From our side, from the point of view of the authentication authorization, I think we need to treat the license information as yet another authorization information, right? So indeed, we already see that we need to be able to express these licensing requirements, either in the sense of auth to scopes in the when we have OpenID Connect flows, or in the sense of entitlements when you're talking about SAML flows. This is where in the SAML space, when we're talking about SAML integrations, where the flow of attributes from the community AI towards the end service is key, because we do want for the community to be able to manage these things centrally at their own environment, and then this information flow directly to the end services. For OpenID Connect Auth 2, things are a bit trickier there. And something that we are looking into, again, I will point to something that Nicolas mentioned, is this ability to be able to do, now it's a bit technical, to do a remote introspection. So we have services connected to some infrastructure proxies, and through these infrastructure proxies, they're connected to a number of community AIs. For example, one for ENVRI or for ENVRI or for EPOS. What we want to be able to do is these leaf services, when they want to have, when a user tries to access them, to be able to validate the tokens that they receive to an introspection endpoint, for example, by the infrastructure proxy, which can then do a remote introspection to actually the community that issued that token. And through this process, to be able to enrich the token with the necessary let's say extra scopes that the user might have for this particular aspect, if that requires extra authorization for information. The difficulty that I see here is that we need to have a common vocabulary for scopes, and that's something that really does need harmonization. I know that many of us have been doing such implementations with a local scope behind the proxies, and this will require now to make it so that it can be used across the boundaries of our infrastructures. Keith, I know that I didn't answer your question fully, but I hope that I gave you some hints of where we're going towards.
Thanks very much, Christos. Yes, I realize it's a difficult question, but I think it's of interest to everybody because I think most RIs have metadata information, including license information for the assets and so on. And it's really tricky to, for example, make sure that you differentiate in the scopes cleanly between CC-BY and CC-BY-NC. This is the kind of real life problem we face.
Fully agree. Fully agree.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, if there is one more question. If not, I would like to ask our speakers to summarize in one sentence before we go back. What do you think is the biggest challenge looking ahead, or what was the biggest challenge that you learned from in the past? So let's try to summarize with this, and then we will be thrown to the big room. Who wants to go first? I see Keith was getting ready for it.
Okay, yeah, I can say something. I mean, I've learned a lot from this session. Thank you very much. But I think that the questions or difficulties that I was posing concerning making sure that AAI is within a complete policy framework is important and very difficult.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Somebody else from our speakers, Jean-François?
Yeah, maybe the biggest challenge was really to understand each other, the community, the ARIs and e-infrastructure. And in the past, I would say this was clearly the biggest challenge. People thinking that they have the solution without really understanding the constraints and the needs of the users. And this is clearly something which is evolving very fast in all domains, not only in AI. And this is key for success.
Yes, I agree. I think we're getting better in establishing different forums where we can exchange our experiences. I hope that the EOSC task forces will be one of those forums for different areas. Christos, Nicolas, last words.
Nicolas was first. I think he has a good.
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I think that there are a lot of challenges, but if I have to pick one, I would say that this multi-domain workflows that we discussed, and I think it was brought up in all of the presentations, will be one of the biggest challenges, and also the integration with cross-sectors identity management systems. So EIDAS identities, and also more new ways of new approaches to identity access management, for example, decentralized identities. So we will have a lot of things to do ahead. We won't be bored, that's for sure.
Yes, that's for sure. Thank you. And Christos.
Perhaps very quickly, just say something that perhaps I haven't said, just to find something different. We are right now on a train, right? I mean, you have to understand that we are already in production with many of the services that compose the EOSC. And at the same time, while this train is going like full speed with all the inertia that it has, we need to make changes to adapt, to improve, to change, and to steer everything towards the direction we want to take it. And this is very challenging. I mean, it would be great if we had started with a clean whiteboard and say, let's design the perfect solution. But we are not living in this world. We are living in a world where everything is already fast happening. And at the same time, we need to continuously improve ourselves and steer the direction. And I think that is something very challenging and many times underestimated.
Yes, agreed. So we are perfect on time. Thank you very much, everybody, for your attention. Thank you very much, speakers, for excellent presentations. Our organizers will be pulling us back very soon. So
thanks
we'll
so
meet
much.
us in the main room. Yes.
We will request you to please return to the main room. You will stop the recording now.